Welcome to the Feminine Truth Podcast with Mary Miranda, a place where you can reconnect with your wild, cyclical, and fierce truth. I am Mary Miranda, a mentor, coach, healer, and intuitive. I guide women on a journey of remembrance, reconnection, and embodiment of who they are, their essence, power, and truth by reawakening the power of their feminine energy, womb, and menstrual cycles. Join me each week to indulge in raw, unedited, and unfiltered topics to help women own and step into their divine feminine truth and become unshakable, unapologetic, and bold in who they truly are. Let's jump into today's conversation. Everyone, welcome to Feminine Truth Podcast. I am so excited for you to be here. And today I have such an amazing woman that I really want you all to get to know. She's my official first podcast interview, which I'm so excited. Her name is Mariela de la Mora, and I want you all to get to know her medicine, her wisdom, and everything about her. So Mariela, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Mary. I'm very excited to be here and to be your first interview. I promise I will do my best to make it easy.
Yeah, so I'm so happy for you to be here. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and pretty much kind of introduce yourself.
Yes. So I am a life and leadership coach for women of color. I primarily work with daughters and granddaughters of immigrants. And the reason for this is because in my professional career, I did a lot of what you would consider the right things, like climbing the corporate ladder and striving for the six-figure job. I was the eldest daughter of Mexican immigrants, and it was just the thing of like, you want to make your family proud. And so in the journey of me, trying to figure out like, who am I versus who my family wanted me to be, I really, really tried to like be the best. And I had to, kind of face myself in the journey of like being in corporate and leading people, and realizing that the higher up I went, the more I faced myself, like the more I faced my own, limiting beliefs and my mindset about not being too bossy, not taking up too much space, being agreeable, all of these things. And I had to face them in that process. And so now what I basically do is I kind of take what I needed, which is what I needed to step into my power and to discover who I really am and to claim my voice. And that, is part of what we're going to talk about today. But that's the reason why I went from a 15-year marketing career to being a life coach and a leadership coach, because I want to help women like me to find their voice and step into their power in hopefully much less time than it took me to do the same thing.
Oh my God, that's so amazing. So I do want to talk a lot about, because when I reach out to you, it's because I heard a conversation that you did on an Instagram Live about boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And I
yes.
just sort of like reach out to you because I've been following you and I've been following everything that you share about being a first generation daughter of immigrants. And what is that, how specifically that, how has that have an impact in your entrepreneurship journey? Like, is there anything that you can talk about that?
Yes. So I think that for me, my entrepreneurship journey really kind of, it honestly represents like the opposite of what I was told or modeled I should do. Because entrepreneurship is, you can't be an entrepreneur without the inner work, because you do face yourself in so many ways. You face your ideas around money, around being visible, around rejection, around uncertainty, so many of these things. And, being a daughter of immigrants, what I was modeled was valuable was stability, predictability. I was modeled that opportunities were given to me and that I needed to be grateful for them and not ask for more, and that was something that's been a process of unlearning, to be like, I am deserving now and I can create my own opportunities. Nobody gives them to me, and that I deserve to take up space. And so I think that those were all things. And then even just to trust myself, because in entrepreneurship, like, you have to trust yourself, knowing that like the steps are not outlined for you. You don't exactly know what's going to happen month to month, but to trust yourself means it's okay because you don't need to predict it, because you can trust that you'll figure it out. And we're not taught that often, at least for me, because a lot of it was like doing things the right way, not making mistakes, often being criticized as a form of love, to be like, well, I'm criticizing you because I want you to be better and I want you to be perfect. And so I had to take all of those things and realize like, whoa, like what is not serving me right now? And so for me, like healing my inner child is actually what allowed me to be able to even do this business. And I couldn't separate the two. It's almost like you need to heal your inner child in order to like thrive in business.
Yeah. No, I totally agree, because that's a lot of the bulk of everything that I have done. It's like heal my inner child, decondition and deprogram from everything that I learned growing up as a daughter of a first generation. And it's just been kind of like doing a lot of the healing work. But how do you feel? Because this is not a lot of things that daughters of immigrants, Latina women talk about, is the trauma that is often carried in us because of our lineage, because of our immigrant descendants,
Yes.
and how it shows up in our lives and businesses. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So I actually had an experience specifically around this, where I was experiencing something that felt bigger than me, but it actually felt bigger than my parents. It felt like I don't know where this comes from, but it feels like I needed some help to figure out what this was. And what was coming up for me was, it's not safe to slow down. It's not safe to rest. If you rest, something can happen. If you slow down, you're lazy, you're not deserving. But the feeling of like it's not safe, I was like, why does it not feel safe? And I remember, seeing my mom, like she can never sit down. We go visit and she's just like looking after everybody, and she's going and she's doing a bunch of things. And sometimes, so I did witness it to an extent of like how hard they had to work, and that even when they're resting, they feel like they have to be doing something, at least my mom. But it felt bigger than that. So I actually worked with a shaman that my life coach recommended to me. So the life coach that I've been working with for a year, and I worked with her, and she was able to see things without me explaining, because she's a shaman. Without me explaining, she just asked my grandparents' names. And because of that, I was able to like realize that it was bigger than me. It literally went down. She looked back like 7 generations on my grandmother's side, and she shared a story with me that essentially was like when my ancestors were colonized, that they were priestesses, they were wise, they were in touch with the earth, they cared for animals, they were just these medicine women. And that when they were colonized, they were stripped of their power, and that it then went into like generation after generation of like men controlling the women, and the women forgetting how powerful that they always were. And that I was meant to remind my lineage and women like me of the fact that they always were priestesses, they were always powerful, and that the reason that it didn't feel safe was because we had to like produce in order to be valuable. And so I think it was just so much of like realizing that in some cases, the things you can't explain are actually bigger than you, and that it's not just your parents, it's actually like trauma that is passed on through generations.
Yes, that is so powerful, because that's a lot of the work that I do, especially when we store a lot of our trauma in our wombs. And last year, when I was transitioning my business to do this menstrual cycle, this reconnecting with your body, with your wounds, and all of this work, my coach at the time, she said to me, okay, so you want to help women with empowerment, being in their feminine truth, sensuality, and all of this, but how are you still judgmental and criticizing the women in your lineage, your feminine lineage? And I literally got goosebumps. I got goosebumps right now, because I was like, oh my God, I am trying to help women in this that I'm able to. But at the same time, I have this subconscious beliefs about the women in my own lineage. So I started tapping into that and doing a lot of rituals of forgiveness, of really returning back to them everything that it doesn't belong to me in my womb, doing doing a lot of this work. But I realized that the women in my lineage, and this is something that I heard you talk about briefly, were, like producers. So they took care of the house. They were
Yes.
housewives. My grandma had like 13 children. They were
Mm-hmm.
breeding machines in a way, in a very respectful way. I'm sharing this. They
Yes.
took care of the house, they took care of the children, they took care of the
Mm-hmm.
house. The food had to be cooked by 7 a.m. because my grandpa had to come from the camp, and
Mm-hmm.
from milking the cows to eat so early. So things had to be ready, the dinner, everything. My grandma didn't really have a life, so she was self-sacrificing. She was very people pleasing,
Yes.
codependent.
Yes.
I inherited a lot of that, those patterns. But
Yes.
when I started dating and I realized that, I was like, okay, this is also, I take responsibility for my own stuff.
Yep.
But when I
Yep.
look back at the women in my lineage, I'm like, oh my God, this is inherited, which is what you're
Yes.
talking about. That we inherit,
Absolutely.
yeah, that we inherit this through our generations from generations. So you and I doing this work, it stops with us. And your daughter,
Yes.
you have a daughter. So
Yes.
I'm pretty sure this is going to help her so much. I'm not a mom. And I think part of the reason why I'm not a mom is that fear that my grandma had so many children, my mom had children, they had no lives. And I think that's kind of something I'm working through, because it's a lot of
Yeah.
like being a mom. Oh my God, I'm not gonna have a life. I'm gonna be self-sacrificing. I'm gonna be a stay-at-home mom.
Mm-hmm.
And like all these things, like it's
Yep.
subconscious fear and anxiety that's still in my body that I
Mm-hmm.
know it's not just mine, it's from my lineage.
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
it's because my coach said, yeah, maybe your grandma didn't want to have all those children, but that's what she had
Mm-hmm.
to do. That's what
Yes.
she had to do because she didn't have
Yes.
a career, anything like that. So
Yeah.
I kind of want to ask you, like, you're this new empowered generation, first generation immigrant, daughter of an immigrant, a mother, an entrepreneur. How has this been for you? Because I don't know if your mom has a career. I don't know like how the women in your lineage have been, but for me, I'm
Mm-hmm.
an entrepreneur, and it has not been easy.
And you're the only one that has been? Yes. So
Yes,
same with me. It's
yes.
same with me. So I, in fact, I'm trying to think. I think there's nobody in my family who's an entrepreneur except my tios that are in Mexico, but my aunts weren't. They married them and they had businesses. So there wasn't anybody in my family who started a business. In fact, nobody in my family moved away from where they grew up. I'm the only person that's moved. I even lived in London at a certain point. I've solo traveled. I met my daughter's father there. He's British, and I lived there. And so I, I knew always like something is different about me. And there was a time where I used to ask myself, like, why can't I just be happy with what I have? And I think some of us ask ourselves that question, especially because I would think about, I quit a 6-figure, marketing job, and it's the job that I always wanted. And I left a marketing career. Like last year, I was a director of marketing, and I was interviewing at companies that were going to pay me a lot of money. But part of me was like, the judgmental voice is like, how dare you want more? Your abuelito he told me this story before he died, that he used to earn 50 cents an hour milking cows at the dairy farm and picking fruits and vegetables. And he would get in trouble for eating too many strawberries. And literally, like, he had to produce the produce. He literally had to produce food and pick it. And same thing with working in the dairy farms. And he said that he lived in the campos and like with other men, and that they worked 7 days a week, and he'd send all his money home, and he'd go home once a year. And my grandmother also had 11 children that survived out of the 16 that she had on one side, and then 7 on the other side. And it was a matter of survival. And so I was, so because I was the oldest in my family, but then even with my cousins, I was one of the oldest. I actually grew up with my grandparents, and I had a relationship with them, and they helped to take care of me. So I was so close to their immigration story that I really had to grapple with feelings that I was selfish or ungrateful because I left a job that they couldn't even dream about. But I was like, I can't shake this feeling that I meant to do something else. And that is so now the fact that I'm an entrepreneur, to be honest, I still grapple with it sometimes. I think like, gosh, well, like I could probably I still get contacted by recruiters. I could just go and get a marketing job and it would just be easier. But there is something in me that like screams out like, no, you are so close. You are doing the work already. You're meant to, it's meant to be bigger now. And so for me, it's been a lot around worthiness. Like, who am I to do this? I'm selfish. And, you know, feeling like, am I being irresponsible because I'm a mom and I need to just like have a steady income? And it's not always steady, you know, in entrepreneurship. So it's been almost like, I don't even know how to describe it, but I feel like I've just been peeling away everything that wasn't me to get to this place, even to the extent that when I started coaching, I was a business and marketing coach. So even to call myself a life coach and a leadership coach is a huge, huge departure from like where my identity was and what I got praised for, you know?
Yeah, actually, I was gonna ask you something really quick because I heard this on a
Mhm.
podcast. I think one of your interviews when I was kind of trying to find out more who you were and everything.
Mhm.
I was so
Yeah.
intrigued, you know. I really like your how you share the your truth, how honest and authentic you are. So, and this is something that I've also struggled with. And when I heard you talk about it, I was like, oh my God, I need to have a conversation with her around this.
Okay.
The significance of being the fulfilled promise or the American dream of our immigrant parents because of their
Mhm.
sacrifice and their hard work. And I'm the first generation. So my dad obviously came here and my mom working out of survival. So
Mhm.
it's how to live up to this standard of the American dream for our parents to make it feel like, to make it seem like it was worth it for them, that coming here was
Yes.
worth it, you know, because everybody in my town is like a very small, gossipy town. Everybody knows each other. Everybody cares about your
Mhm.
reputation and el que dirán and all of that. So when you
Mhm.
come to the United States, it's like for success and how to live
Yes.
up to that expectation. It's a lot. It's a lot of
Yes.
pressure.
Yes, I think the phrase that I use is I felt like I needed to be my parents' receipt for America, or
Yeah,
like their trophy child.
there we go.
Because and I wanted to be the child that they bragged about at least. And I think the reason I said that in particular is because that is when the family gets together, the tias and everybody talk. And there's also a lot of judgment because that definitely was the case in, you know, my family, where it was like, you know, the tias kind of always judge like who the brother marries and stuff. And I know that my mom and just women in general, they want to be able to say, oh, well, my kid is doing this. And that happened a lot in my family. Like they were not to say they weren't nice, but it was a lot about like how things look and children being a reflection of how good of a parent you are. And I just wanted to be that child so much. And I was that child for a long time. And to be honest, I feel like I still am, but there were years where I'm sure I made that difficult and I just had to let it go. To be like, why is she traveling? She doesn't have a job. Like she's not making money. And I was just quitting jobs. I always felt like, what am I doing? You know what I mean? And I think I had to realize that like we it's up to us to redefine what the American dream means for us because they got us this far. And now it's like we can ask ourselves, like, well, where to from here? Because they didn't go through it. Really, if we think about it, it's like they struggled so much so that we wouldn't have to focus on survival. So who are we when we're not focused on survival? And that's a question we get to ask ourselves. They didn't get to ask themselves. They didn't get to do that inner exploration. We get to do that. So it was a reframe around what does the American dream mean when you're not focused on survival.
Mhm.
Like we focus on thriving now and we're focusing on giving back and like giving back to others and our communities and all of that. And they didn't really get to do that. So that, but it hasn't been easy, but that's basically where my mind, like I said, I still grapple with that sometimes about like, what does the American dream mean for me? And I think the biggest thing for me is freedom. Like I see my parents and my parents both still work. My dad says he's going to retire this year, but I really, really doubt it because it's so much of his identity. He's been at the same company since 1976. My mom is an executive assistant, you know, and their version of I don't even know if it was freedom. They just wanted stability. And now I'm like, I want freedom. I want choices. I want impact. I want to help other people change their lives. Like that's just a different level of thinking that is a privilege for me to have.
Yes, yes, that is so powerful because when I think about it, is that too, because I was raised always being in pain, struggle, sacrifice, pain. Like you have to work hard for it. You don't
Mm-hmm.
work for hard for it, you don't deserve it. So I always felt
Mm-hmm.
very undeserving of everything because I'm like, no, I have to kill myself working like my parents did. And
Yes.
this guilt that I've had when I started this journey, that I'm like, how do I want everything so easy and effortless and just make money coaching women? Like, no,
Yeah.
it has to be harder. It has to be harder. And I kept
Yep.
putting that on me, and I kept making things harder, and I had burnout. I was miserable. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I'm
I
like,
bet that you even created it, because that's the thing, is that when it starts to feel easy, it's so easy for your brain to be like, this feels too easy. I'm gonna, I'm gonna over deliver. I'm gonna get like, and then in a bad way, I'm gonna do more than I'm supposed to do, or I'm gonna charge less because this is too much, and like, who am I to charge? And so you start to like get in your own way sometimes when you start to like believe those stories that like it's supposed to feel hard. And it's not that entrepreneurship isn't hard, because it absolutely is, but we have to get out of the mindset of like exchanging time for money, because that it's a totally different, like, it's a totally different situation. But yeah, just the fact that it's supposed to feel hard and you're supposed to struggle, otherwise you don't deserve it. I think that's a huge like belief that we have to unlearn.
yes, I think it's not only for daughters of immigrants or women of color, but it's like, it is a little harder for us, I feel,
Yeah.
because there's so many people, the privilege and everything that's been going on, this that was uncovered within the past year with the privilege,
Mm-hmm.
like white people, and like the Black
Mm-hmm.
Lives Matter and all of this. But
Yeah.
it's just been it, I had to do a lot of work, and I'm still doing the work, because things come
Mm-hmm.
up that I'm like, oh, I thought I had already healed that. And like, it's always like kind of
Ooh, yes.
coming back to it, because it's different layers. And the more you
Absolutely.
up level, the more you want more abundance, freedom, the more those inner demons come back. And
Yeah.
it's just an ongoing learning of healing and delayering and deconditioning and deprogramming and all of that, that I don't think it ever really ends 100%.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we get better at recognizing it, and then not allowing it to like guide us, or we don't make our decisions like based on that. So, I mean, one example of that is around money, because not that everybody wants the same thing in their business, right? But let's say, you want to grow your impact and launch multiple programs and just serve more people. If you want to serve more people, you need to have more programs, which means you probably need help, and you need to hire help, which means you need to make more money so that you can pay the help and pay your teams. And then that means you look at, oh my gosh, I have these expenses. And so when you start to think about like your scarcity around money, and that it could dry up at any time, and that's kind of what I grew up with, was like, no matter how secure you are in your job, like save every penny, like don't ever take any risks, like don't ask for, just protect your money, save your money, right? So I've had to grapple with like having more expenses than like literally ever in my life. And it's hard because I'm like, whoa, I every now and then I'm just like, gosh, maybe it would just be easier to like not do this, because if I didn't have a business, I wouldn't have any expenses other than my day-to-day. I wouldn't have, to pay like team members or accountants or like any of these things. But it's like, if I want to make a bigger impact, I have to face this. And just when I faced it and I want to go to another level or whatever, like I have to face it again. So you're never really done.
Yeah.
It's like you get to a certain place, and then your brain is like, okay, we're comfortable here, we don't want to leave. Your brain's never going to just be like, okay, no, this is fine. It's like, how are you going to get yourself out of it, but to really realize like it's just your mind trying to keep you safe, and you're thinking about experiences you grew up with, maybe with your parents, things they told you or things that you witnessed around them not having enough money, and that's going to try, your mind's going to try to keep you safe. So
Yes.
that's been one that I've been grappling with.
Yeah, I've had to do a lot of healing, and I'm still doing it. Like I'm saying, like for so many different areas, right? Um, about money
Yeah.
mindset, because it was always living paycheck to paycheck with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always like kind of like struggling that there's never enough money, like money doesn't grow on
Yes.
mindsets. And also
Yep.
rich people, that I had this I grew up
Yeah.
in a small town, but like the school that I went to was a paid school. So it was not a public school. It was like my parents had to pay for us to go there, and it was like three of us going there. So I just remember that it was around like a lot of my friends had a lot of money, and I always felt inferior. I always felt not enough.
Oh.
I always felt like I was the one
Mm-hmm.
struggling, kind of grasping to get things.
Yep.
And I couldn't get the backpack all my friends had. I couldn't get the braces
Mm,
because they were too expensive. I got retainers, which were cheap,
okay.
you know?
Yeah.
It's like little things like that, like the school uniforms. My mom used to, she's an amazing clothing designer, I guess, like
Mm-hmm.
costurera, we call it in Mexico.
Yeah, like
And
a
he's like, no,
seamstress.
you're a
Yeah.
designer. I'm like, you're a designer, mom. Like, you're a clothing.
Yeah.
She was sewing my clothes, which she was amazing, but all my friends were buying the clothes at the store. So it's just like this little thing that I
Yes.
picked up. And I remember in kindergarten, my graduation, my parents gave me this beautiful baby color rainbow sweater that somebody knitted. It was so
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. I was so happy. And then all my little friends got really expensive gifts. And I remember like moms are like, oh, so what did you get, Mary? And I'm like, so proud of my little sweater, so proud of it.
Oh.
And they were like, oh, that's all you got? And they're looking at me from head to toe. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
first time I felt a difference in
Yeah.
social economical levels. I felt
Yes.
inferior, and I grew up. And when I came here, I realized that I had this inferiority complex that I've always felt in.
Yeah.
That kind of developed into an imposter syndrome now that I'm an entrepreneur. And
Yes.
that's still kind of very loud, feeling inferior to white women specifically, or women that make more money
Oh,
than
yep.
me. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not good enough, but it's because of this narrative that I had since I was little. How? And
Yes.
my parents always saying, oh, if you're rich, if you have money, you're stuck up, you're conceited, you're not a
Yep.
nice person, you're not a nice person, you're mean, you're selfish, all you care about you don't care about the poor, you
Mm-hmm.
care about helping others, which is not true, because when you
Yep.
have money, it's amazing
Yes.
because you have an abundance. You can help more. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're not a nice people before money, you're not going to be a nice people after money. So this
This
is
is
about
true. Money only amplifies who you are already. And I hear those same things. It's funny. I remember my parents came to visit me here, and we went to one of the parks here. I think it was like the botanical gardens, and in where the botanical gardens are, there's houses on the hills. And I don't know, I think that it's just like the separation from them like allowed me to kind of like observe it more. But she was like, oh, my dad was like, oh, I wonder how much like those houses are, here, because I've been thinking about moving here. And she's like, I know. She's like, esos son para los ricos, like that's just for the rich people. And I'm just like, but my parents have been working their whole lives to pay off this house that is worth maybe a million and a half in San Francisco, which isn't, to be honest, in San Francisco, a million and a half is not that much. But it's like, so at what point do you say, like, I've literally worked hard my whole life, saved all my money, paid off this house, and you still are like, oh no, but that's like for the rich people? I'm like, you guys made it. You have a million, you're sitting on a million and a half like house. Like, it's like this identity, but it's the way that they say it is like it's a bad identity, and I don't want that. And that's for the rich people. It's another, thing. And so I've really had to face that too, where I've actually caught myself being like, oh, it's not about the money. And it's like, well, that's not my main motivator, but I also recognize how it stops me from being able to serve, because if I can't afford to hire help, or I can't afford, certain things, then I can't make that impact. So really, really checking, like, what are the things you heard about money growing up? And maybe are you still self-sabotaging yourself from making more because somehow you think, I don't want to become a bad person if I make too much money. And there's ideas that people will have around, I'm going to lose my friends, or people are going to judge me because we judged people growing up that had money. So you might start to self-sabotage yourself, literally, because you think bad things are going to happen if you get the thing that you actually want.
Yeah, and that totally happens because I grew up seeing how my parents used to let my uncles and aunts borrow money, and they would never
Uh,
be paid. The money would never come back to my parents, so they would lose money, or they would struggle like cobrándoles, or just getting the
yes.
money back. They would struggle a lot because my uncles would ghost, would stop talking to my parents. So I
Yep.
grew up with the narrative that my parents are like, people only use you. People only want
Uh,
money, and then they don't really care about you. All they care
oh,
about is
yes.
money. And I grew up with that. So
Yep.
I was sabotaging literally like 2 years ago when I started this journey. that I didn't want to make money because I didn't want people to ask me to borrow money.
So
I
funny.
did that. I
Yeah.
did
Where you don't want to talk about it because you're just like, oh, they're going to
that.
see you have
Yeah,
money.
and my
Oh, I
parents
know.
always said, don't ever post how much you make. Don't ever post your success because they retire and they live in Mexico. And right now, the area where we live is it's really bad with the government
Mm,
and all of that. It's really bad, unfortunately. And my
yeah.
parents were like, don't ever talk about money because we can get kidnapped, which it has happened to a lot of people in the
Yep.
town.
Yep.
So it's just, I feel like kind of like in prison when it comes to that because it's like, oh my God,
Yeah.
I cannot even if I
Celebrate
ever make
it.
a lot of money, like I cannot even celebrate it, which is okay. But I'm like, am I the type of person that would post how much money she makes? Ooh, and there's
Mhm.
like all this like beliefs that come when I think
Judgment
about,
around that.
yeah, like no,
Yeah.
people are gonna think I'm this and that. I'm like, oh my God, I still have healing around this, and here I go again.
This is so true. So, firstly, it's interesting to note that culturally, there is a difference if your parents live in a country where like it isn't safe. Because that's the reason I've never visited Mexico really. Like, I've gone to tourist places, but my dad was always like, it's not safe. I left. I don't really have any interest in going back. They kidnap people, all this. And I never went back. Right. I never really, really, really visited. So there is some truth to that. But also it's like, what did you internalize? Because I've actually struggled with that as well, where I started to talk about it when I was a business coach, then I stopped talking about it. And then I think I needed to see enough women like me post about how much money they made for me to say, does that feel different to me when I see a Latina posting about, how much money she's making? Does it feel different to me? And the real answer was like, yes, because I think that subconsciously when I saw white women posting like, oh, I had a whatever 20K month, I thought, oh, pero they're rich people, right? Or like they're white people. And you think that that's not for you. It's something about it made it real. It made it feel accessible to me. Like I could really do it. And so I did start sharing more around it, mostly because I had to let go of my own story that like, oh, I don't want people to think that like I'm in, all I care about is money, even though no one is going to think that. But I started to share it because I wanted women to know that I could be a single parent and be a Latina working through her generational trauma, and I can still make six figures in my first, 12 months. Barely, but I made, barely six figures. But I'm like, that is, to me, I'm like, I feel like I have to say that. I feel like I have to say that. And to say that I didn't, that I did it my way and that it's okay and that there isn't like a blueprint and I didn't follow anything, that I was coached to do, to be honest. So we almost have a responsibility sometimes. We don't have to do it publicly, but I think to just share because our example means so much more. Our example means so much more to women who look like us, I think.
Yes, and this is huge work of decolonization, especially
Mm-hmm.
modern to first generation. So what work have you done for yourself and that you help? Because I know you help clients with this. This is your like cup of tea
Yes.
for now, right?
Yes. Yes. I think I really had to even understand where my own mind was still like colonized, like what did I believe? And to be honest, I did not realize this until like last May, June with the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think the reason that awakened me to it was because I realized like, gosh, my business coach was a white woman. Every person I had given money to in my first year of business in courses was all white, and they were big names. And there was something about that where I was like, how come I still feel like I know what to do, but I can't do it? And then I realized like every coach that I was following was white. Every person I was interacting with was white. So like, no wonder I was really struggling, because I think part of me was like, it's not for me, it's for them. And I think when I realized that, I saw them as being the gatekeepers of knowledge. I saw them as being the only people that could like really help me because they were white. And I wasn't actively thinking these things, but I think I was leveraging, they were just beliefs that I adopted. And so I realized like, okay, the way that I sell and market is like, even that is like, I was taught how to manipulate and how to like use fear and scarcity tactics and false sense of urgency and really like dig at people's pain points. And I was a marketer before, but I never marketed to people like one-on-one. I usually was within bigger businesses. So it affected everything from how I sold, how I ran sales calls, my pricing, to be honest, because I was told like you need to charge more and more and more and more. And to be honest, I have different levels now where I'm like, there's certain clients where I'm like, it just doesn't take as much of my time. So I'm not going to charge you more just because I've been doing this longer. Like, I just don't believe that. It should be a price that feels good to you. And you're not taught that. So I basically had to decolonize like literally everything from my marketing to my sales to how I served clients to be a lot more consent-based, to be able to take into consideration their life experience, their trauma, and just kind of really throw out a lot of the ideas that I built my business on initially. So it's been a process. It's been a process, but I feel like it's allowed me to serve like a really diverse client base from like women from all different backgrounds in different countries. And that's earned, to be honest, because that means women who have parents from different countries all over the world trust me because I obviously have earned their trust. And I didn't want to, I wanted that. To me, I'm so proud of that. Like, I'm really proud of that because the impact that I want to make is on women of color. But you don't earn the trust of women of color if you aren't a safe space for them.
Yes, and you have to be an embodiment of the work that you do. And
yes,
and they have to see that it's kind of that relatability that you have overcome or still working through the struggles that they have. So it's kind of like they feel like that's safety net because they look at you and they're like, oh my gosh, she's that woman of color, Mexican generation. She's a mother, she's an entrepreneur, like she's overcome what I'm going through. Like, oh my God, I feel safe. And so it's just that safety. And what you said right now, I relate about when my first like 2 years of being an entrepreneur, I used to only hire white coaches, like subconsciously follow them because why, like very underneath everything is like the American dream. The white people, this is what you want to achieve, white people. You have to, it's not like I wanted to be a white woman, but subconsciously I'm like, that is the American dream, be like a white woman. Like,
and they have the key.
Yeah.
And that's what I used to tell myself. Like they have the key.
The word matter more. They knew all the knowledge, like they knew how to do things, they knew the way. So I kind of subconsciously kind of just subscribed to that, like a little. I felt like I was so blind when it came to that. I invested a lot of money in white coaches, and not that they're amazing, but they were not for me. They were not for me. And I did not know it because they gave me the medicine that I know now, even though I invested a lot of money, that I had to work with a lot of regret, the guilt, the shame that I paid so much money and that it didn't work out. It was not because they were not the good coaches. It just, they were not the right fit for me. They were not trauma informed. They didn't know about the immigration lens. They didn't know about what it's like to be a first generation woman here in the United States. They don't know all the struggles that we do. And I remember my business coach that I hired 2 years ago, I remember that I felt, and I didn't know this at the time, like gaslighting and like she bypassed that sometimes I would be like, oh, I just feel like I don't have what it takes. I just feel like I'm not meant for success. I just feel like I have all this limiting beliefs. And she's like, oh, don't ever say that again. You are meant for success. And she's trying to be but underneath, and she's like, okay, don't ever say that again. Start saying these affirmations. And I'm like, well, that doesn't feel like anything to me. It didn't land to me because the trauma, it was in my body, like, it's like this, and it also came from,
and it was modeled to you.
It's so whenever she tried coaching me, I stopped feeling safe in her presence because I felt like she just wanted me to shut up, to be silent. She wanted me to never talk again, just like my parents would always say, cállate, no vuelvas a decir eso.
And you're wrong.
Yeah, you're wrong. So I just felt like that, and she started feeling not safe, and I started seeing her talk more about other clients that she had than me. So I started feeling like I'm good enough, and like all this. That was also my own stuff to work through that I didn't know at the time. But she triggered a lot of me. That thanks to that relationship, I have been able to do a lot of healing when it comes to that. But what I ask is like, why is it important to work with a coach who is
Yes.
trauma informed, who understands the difference between, our experiences as immigrants, as daughters of immigrants, because first generation, and this cultural conditioning. Like, why is it important to have a coach that knows?
Yes. So the analogy that I've used in the past is that trauma, when your limiting beliefs, and we talk about limiting beliefs, they come from somewhere. Your mindset comes from somewhere. If you don't understand it, and you're working with somebody who isn't trauma informed, or at least understand, you don't need to know somebody's culture in order to help them or to hold space for them. Because I've certainly worked with women from different cultures from mine, but there's enough similarities. And I honestly think it's possible even for a white person to hold space effectively for a person of color. It's much more challenging, but I think that the most important thing is just, if you aren't able to help your clients understand where these beliefs came from, and you just want to tack on new beliefs and new behaviors on top of that, it's like painting over a mold. So you can paint over mold and it's going to look pretty, but then you wait, and then the mold's going to start like creeping back up again. You're not actually fixing anything. It's like termites. Like, it's just going to keep coming back, and it's going to be worse next time, because now you've ignored it. And now you've put this person in a situation where, like, oh my gosh, like I have to do this. And so the reason that it's important is because a trauma-informed coach, or at least a culturally sensitive or culturally aware coach, will be able to ask questions to help you get to the root of, where did you feel this way before? So when you say, I don't think I can do this, I'm not deserving. And when you say, like, okay, where, like, do you have memories of feeling this way? Did somebody, like, just tell me about that. Like, have you always felt this? Is this the first time you've ever felt this way? And most of the time they'll say no. Like, I used to always feel this way. I didn't want to get it wrong. And my parents would always criticize. And the thing about understanding where something comes from and helping them to dig back is that you can, number one, release the shame around it, because you go, oh my gosh, I have a real reason why I feel this way. It's not that it's not true. It served me at a time when I was a child. So I think, number one, you're able to observe it. Number two, you can release shame and judgment around it. Number three, it gives you a reason, like you actually have a cause for it, which is incredibly validating. And then I think you can actually address it at the source. You can talk to the little girl and be like, what did she need to hear at the time? And sometimes those things are, you're beautiful and you're worthy as you are. You don't need to get an A. You don't need to erase your homework and redo it. We love you. It's okay if you make a mistake. We're not going to throw it in your face. We'll always be here no matter what. And that's where the reparenting comes in, because if you're just trying to change the symptom of how it's showing up today, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to do that. You actually might have to have a conversation with yourself as a child, and even forgive your parents and forgive them for doing the best that they had with what they knew. But that's where healing happens. Like, that is where real like reckoning happens, like at the core of where it happens. And then you can be like, I can leave that behind now. That was never me. I can figure out who I really am now. Otherwise, it's very, very hard to do that. And that is why I knew I couldn't just do business coaching, because what wound up happening with the women I was attracting, which was daughters of immigrants, is that we would wind up spending more time talking about mindset than we did about strategy. And the more I would be like, do this, do this, do this, they're like, okay, but what about this? And what about this? And I was like, okay, I feel like I'm feeding this like anxiety spiral. And we started unwinding that. And rather than me feeding the anxiety spiral of giving them answers and then being terrified of getting it wrong and disappointing me because they would tell me this, we started talking more about childhood. And to be honest, what wound up happening was they had way more answers than they thought that they had. They had all the answers. They needed me to help them a little bit, to be honest, but rather than it being 80% me, 20% them, it flipped to where it was like 80% them, 20% me, because they were able to actually understand like why they can't trust themselves in the first place. So that is why, that is why, I do the work that I do, and why I feel like anytime you coach someone, like without understanding them and who they are in their life and all of that is like super, super important, or at least to be able to hold space for it.
Yes, that's totally true, because the coach that I had, the business coach, she was not trauma informed. She didn't know how to support me in what I need.
Yeah.
And it's not because she, like I said, she's an amazing. She was helping all these women hit 6 figures,
Mm-hmm.
10K, 20K. So it was also like about me and everything I came, all the conditioning and programming. I
Yeah.
didn't know it was that much. And I
Mm-hmm.
was doing the work hard,
Yep.
like
Yep.
hard because it's just so much every day, like things come up, you know? And it's just like, for me, I am so passionate about finding the root. Just
Yeah.
I struggle even with health issues, like doctors,
Mm-hmm.
it was like a band-aid approach, right?
Yep.
Like a band-aid approach. You just want to put a band-aid, give you like a pill, and that's going to solve the thing. But it's like,
Yep.
no, what is the root? What is it? Why is this
Yes.
happening? So like when I started doing the work in me, I'm like, no, I am going to be my own advocate. I'm going to find my
Mm-hmm.
own answers. I'm going to find out why I have this limiting belief, why this is
Right.
happening to me, why I have this health issue, why I'm not able to attract the men that I desired.
Yep.
And it's just like everything goes back to childhood. I was like, oh, that's kind
Yep.
of funny. The common denominator is
Yeah.
childhood.
It is.
And yes, and everything in your life is like, oh, trace it back. It goes back to childhood. And you know, in
It
childhood,
does.
it also comes through like generational trauma and all of this. So, and even past life trauma too that comes with us.
Yep.
Finding the root has been amazing in my journey, and then
Yep.
finding why I even have endometriosis, like as I help women with. So, and this is like,
Oh.
so this is so funny because right now that you mentioned that you're like, you were a business coach, but everything that you were helping women behind the scenes was like the conditioning, the healing,
Yep.
everything. And that's
Yep.
exactly what I started doing because women come to me about like there's womb health issues or about this or why, or when I was dating a relationship coach and everything's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about your childhood and then all
Yes.
of the work. And I was like, okay, I am really passionate about doing the inner work. Like I am like
Oh yeah.
the shadow work, finding their roots. I'm like, because once you find the root, it is so much easier to start from there.
Yes.
And it's like a ripple effect to your entire life. So
Yep.
it's just like one of those things that is just, I wish more people knew about it. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on this show, because you are a leadership coach, a life coach, but also like a business coach in a way. But
Yeah.
you deal with the root. You talk
Yes.
about like the behind the scenes of who you are when nobody sees anything. It's like, what is your truth? Who are you
Yes.
underneath everything? And that's something
Exactly.
that I'm so passionate about. And I'm so glad that I was able to find you talk about
Yeah,
this.
I am too. And I hope more people really start to, recognize that, like, if you have patterns that show up in your life, and something continuously happens, it probably is related to a trauma. And oftentimes it's not a lot of different ones. It's a lot of times, like, it goes down to a few key things that are just happen to be popping up in a lot of different areas in your life. It could be in your relationship, it can be in in your business, it can be in dating, it can be with your children. But it's like the script. It's a script that's running in the background, and it's running things unless you actually are able to read it and be like, what is this script that's been running in my life? So absolutely, like, I feel the same way. And that's the reason why, no matter what the goal is, I always address the roots. So there's always a goal, and that's leading, being a better leader for your team, or the goal is something with your business, or the goal is something else. There's always a goal, but they want to be seen for who they are in trying to achieve the goal, instead of like, okay, we'll just do it. Here's the steps. Like, just go ahead and do it. That doesn't work. It's, let's understand what is actually holding you back, how it's showing up, and then we can actually have a more, a more human approach to achieving our goals and our dreams and becoming the person that we want to be.
Yes, because a lot of times we have this goal that we want to achieve, but there's all these blocks that we're like, how come it's not happening? Self-sabotage, we procrastinate, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, and all of this, but you don't know that there's like a root to that, because a lot of people are like,
Absolutely.
push through it, just commit, just be disciplined. And I tried, and I was like, it's not working, because when I tried to sit still, be disciplined, committed, focus, my body, my nervous system was so dysregulated that was just not safe.
Yes.
I was always in fight or flight. I was always in anxiety. I'm like, why is this happening? So when I addressed the roots, and I've been working on my nervous system, the somatic work, the body work, it's when everything changed, because I'm like, okay, now this is why my body has been living in fight or flight. This
Yeah.
regulated, and I didn't know about.
Yeah.
I always thought I had all this, like I was very fearful, doubtful, but I never knew I had anxiety. I knew
Uh-huh.
I had anxiety. Like I never
Yeah.
had panic attacks. I
We
never
don't
knew.
even talk about those
No,
oftentimes
no,
growing up.
I just, yeah, it was
we're
just,
just
we don't talk about that because for us culturally, if we go to a therapist or we start taking
oh yeah.
medications or anything like that, it's because you're crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You're crazy,
And
which is
your parents can even take it personally to be like, well, what did we do? We gave you everything.
yeah.
And so it becomes like a lot of judgment around that, and recognizing that like we have emotional, needs, and that trauma is stored in the body, because yeah, your body will react to that. So even in the entrepreneur space, even phrases like following your fear or do it scared or messy action can work for some people, but for other people it can be really triggering. And it's not to say that you wait until you don't feel fearful to move forward, but I think without recognizing where the fear comes from, you're kind of gaslighting the person. And that's why I feel like understanding where it comes from, is super important.
That is so important. Okay, so we're almost about to wrap up, but I do want to ask you a question.
Okay.
So since you've done a lot of healing work on you, you have done taking care of your little girl, your inner child and everything, what is your truth now? Who is Mariela de Mora now, after underneath all the conditioning, programming, belief systems, triggers, colonization, everything that has shaped you until now? Who is the real you? What is
When
your essence? Like who is Mariela?
when you first started asking this question, I was already looking for the answer, because I didn't know you were going to ask me this question. And this part of me, the perfectionist in me, is like, oh my God, you need to give a profound answer. But by the time, because this is still my tendency, right? So, but by the time you finished asking the question, I was like, I know what image came to mind for me. Of who I am. And it's an image that came to mind in my, I don't know if some people know what this phrase is, but it's like during my dark night of the soul, which was like the hardest time of my life, like literally the most painful time of my life, where I was really seeking for meaning. And I actually see that I've embodied this now, but I got this image of a lighthouse. And a lighthouse, and I don't know where, if I read something somewhere and it sparked this, but a lighthouse can only experience its true essence in the dark. In the day, it serves no purpose. And so if you are wondering why you feel like maybe you've experienced a disproportionate amount of pain in your life, it's because you're meant to be a lighthouse for others to find their way home. And at the time, I had just started like my awakening process, and now I feel like my purpose is to be a lighthouse. And when I asked myself, like, why did my marriages not work out? And like, why did all of these things not work out? The picket fence and the house and all of these things, I truly believe I was meant to be a lighthouse, and that I was chosen by my ancestors. And in fact, my ancestor spoke to the shaman who told me she did choose me. She used the term, something about like the diamond, where the diamond has to experience pressure in order to become the diamond. And I believe many of us are these people that are meant to be lighthouses, are meant to be the diamonds. We meant to experience pressure so that we can help other people to find their way home. And I feel like I found her now. So that's who I am.
That is so powerful, not only for you, for your daughter, your lineage,
Yeah.
your ancestors, that I'm pretty sure they're applauding and so proud.
Yeah, I hope so. Because I've been spending my whole life being like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just be happy?
Yeah, and also the women that follow you, that is so empowering. I feel like I am too. I am like the black sheep of the family, the one that cycle breaker and all of this, rebel in a way, because I'm going against everything my parents have taught me.
Yes.
And,
yes.
Especially with the line of work that I do, it's just not, I'm not being supported on it, but it's okay, because I learned to have my own approval and validation. And
absolutely,
if I don't have theirs, I understand. And it was just a lot of forgiving. It was a lot of releasing them from me needing them to accept me. I'm like, no, it's like that. It's okay if they don't. One day they'll come. I had a hard time accepting them for who they were. So it was like, it's reciprocal. It was a reflection.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah.
Actually, that's so true. They have a hard time accepting you. You have a hard time accepting them. And all of this comes up a lot with my clients. Like more than once this week, I've had conversations around this, and there's a little bit of sadness sometimes that comes from that, realizing that they live in a different reality than us, and maybe they're never going to fully see us and experience us for who we are, but that's okay, because anybody that's ever created change, you know, in generations or in history, has always kind of been this outlier. And we will create a bigger impact, or maybe they will understand better through us being, rather than trying to explain or get validation. And maybe they won't ever, but that we will do more by being rather than explaining.
Yes, exactly. Because we grew up performing, doing, trying to, you
Get
know,
approval
achievers and all of this, when we
Yep.
learned to get love through doing things, not by who we were. And that's
exactly
learning lesson for me on my journey. And it's just
yes.
amazing. And they'll come around, and if they don't, it's fine.
Yeah.
But it's been one of those journeys with my parents.
You know, they might. Mine definitely came a very, very, very long way, especially since my daughter was born. And that caused me to really step into this, because I was like, I am not passing this on. So you never know. Everyone's parents are different, but I would have never thought that I could have the conversations that I can have with my parents, but it took a very long time. So you never know, but it wouldn't have changed any of the actions that I took, even if they didn't.
Yeah, I learned that if I wanted change, I had to start with me.
Yeah.
And I had to start changing me, because once I changed, they were going to change around me. And their relationship has definitely changed.
Yeah.
I couldn't be around them because I used to get so triggered, to
yes.
my arms and my legs would be in pain from all the stress that my body couldn't take. And I didn't know why, and I couldn't be around them. Now I'm able to be around them, and that's okay. And it's like, for me, that's success. To be able
it absolutely is.
There was a lot of criticizing. There was a lot of judging. There was a lot of, how come you're not domestic enough? How come you don't? Because I'm going through the final process of a divorce. It's like, why are you divorcing? Da, da, da. And it's just like, going home. And it's just like all this like judgment and all of this, that I was just like, well, I don't like being domestic. I don't like cleaning the house. I don't like doing any.
Yeah, and you don't have to do it that way.
And this is when my coach is like, well, you need to heal your feminine lineage, because here you are trying to be the new ancestor for your feminine lineage, but you have all these things, like all this resentment toward them that is stored in your womb. And you want to help women, which you can help them, but you have to be an embodiment. So I became my own best client.
Yeah.
Myself through the process, not the process. I didn't really have a process, but through what takes someone.
A journey.
So I had to do a lot of healing on my feminine lineage, and being okay with not being domestic, being okay with not loving cleaning, because this is a huge thing. If you don't know how to clean and cook, you're a failure as a Latina.
Oh, I know. That is the same thing with me.
If you don't know how to make tortillas, well, they know that I'm like, I don't know how to make it.
And nobody's going to want you, and that's what it is. And then who are you if you don't do that? So
I know
absolutely.
I know how to cook. Like, don't get me wrong, but not.
I do too. I just don't like to. I'm tired.
Not anything traditional, like not all those Mexican dishes. Like, I don't really know how to make them. I make my own healthy because I'm very into health and fitness. I make
and healthy. A lot of our food is not.
So it's just like, it's like I'm like, because I'm more modern in a way, but at the same time, like, I don't. But at the same time, it's like, oh, those recipes are gonna die with my mom. Like, who's gonna? So I have them all written down just in case. But it's
good to have them written down, even if you don't do them. But I love what you said about you are the new ancestor to your lineage. I thought that was so powerful. I had not thought about it that way. I think in that way, I feel like, wow, I actually have a responsibility to be this, this being the cycle breaker. And I hadn't thought about that. So I thank you for that. Like, I'm going to sit and think about that one.
Because I have nieces. I have 3 nieces, going to be 4 in August. So for me, it's like, okay, we got to do this work now deeper for healing the feminine.
Right.
And also because I'm going to be one day an example for them, because the work that I do is liberation. And decolonization and all of that. So for me, it's very important to be a role model. And when I think about, I'm like, I'm the future ancestor of these little girls. Like I am the ancestor of my ancestors'
Yeah.
dreams, or, so when I
And
think
just
about
being the
that,
example we didn't have, because
yeah,
I only saw one example of a woman, and that is to be a wife and mother. And it's a beautiful, wonderful
yes,
thing, but it changes something when you actually see somebody in your family and they're like, let's say, seeing someone who's like, I got divorced, I didn't see divorce in my family, or choosing not to have children, or choosing to travel, or choosing to whatever. I didn't see that. We had to be that person and grapple with it. But for them, it's going to be so much easier because they're going to have the example.
yes, yes.
And
So
that's a beautiful thing.
thank you. So one thing I want to ask you, one more thing. It's like, what is a shadow part of you that has truly been hard to overcome or heal? And you're probably still doing the work, but what is something
Oh
that's
yes.
difficult?
Oh, yes. I would say rejection. I have huge abandonment issues. And so for me, rejection shows up as fear of failure, fear of public failure. And so it showed up specifically in the fact that I don't actively sell or pitch. I tend to just kind of have conversations, and I've gotten by like really well on this, but I've gotten to a point now where I'm like, why does it feel so scary to put myself on what feels like a stage, to fall on my face and fail? That comes from my abandonment issues of being like, people are going to watch me fail, and I don't ever want to fail publicly, so I'm just going to do everything behind the scenes, but I'm never going to say that I want something. I'm never going to announce that I'm in anything like that, because I don't want to fail. So that is by far the hardest one, and it's been following me around for years, and I'm coming face to face with it right now and having conversations with my self every day about this, to be like, am I really less worthy if I don't get the results that I thought that I was going to get? Why does this feel so big? But it really is. It is the work, and it never stops, but that's mine.
I have the same one, but mine is also public humiliation. I do have
Yeah.
I have a humiliation wound from elementary school. When I was
Mm,
old, I was humiliated in public in my school. Um,
yeah.
and it was just this, it's taken a lot of healing sessions about that. And it was also tied to betrayal of a little friend that I had.
Uh,
And she accused me of something. And I was like, but I gave you that gift. Why would you think I stole the gift that I gave you? Like, that doesn't make
oh,
sense.
yeah.
And it was a little notebook that I got here when I came to visit my dad when I was little. And she just told the nuns that I stole it, and they just humiliated me so much. I never told my mom, I never told anyone, but I carried this, and it was in my body.
Yeah.
So like it was just this rejection, humiliation, this like, and
Humiliation,
I can
because
see
that's
how,
public.
yes, yes, and
Exactly. That's,
failing
yeah.
publicly and people laughing about
Mm-hmm.
me. Las me reí.
Exactly.
Oh, man, it's so deep.
Exactly. And then you notice certain things in entrepreneurship will mimic that feeling. And to me, launching a program publicly and talking about how many spots you have left, to me is like being on a stage, to be humiliated, to be like, well, you said you had this many spots. And so I really had to be like, how could I sell in a way that isn't like that? And so a lot of business is like, how could you do it in a way that feels like more in authenticity to you? Because I swear to you, it's terrifying when people launch things and they talk about messy action and all of that. It just brings me back to childhood. And I'm like, I don't ever want to announce something that I could fail at. I'd rather have these one-to-one like conversations and sales conversations and all of this, and not announce something until I feel a little bit more secure.
Yeah.
We're working through it, but even recognizing any memories you have from childhood, especially from before you're 7, it's probably because it was an incredible day or because it was a traumatic day. And I remember more of like my traumatic days than anything else. So they shape us, it doesn't mean we have to operate under that fear forever, but honoring where it came from is it's just validating. And I think we all need that.
Yes.
So
So
yeah.
wonderful. And the last question that I have for you, I'm sorry,
Yes.
we're going a little bit over.
All right.
What is a ritual that you do to be in an energetic alignment to your truth, to who you are, to your essence, and that helps you just be rooted in you and your body, your intuition?
Yeah. I recently restarted doing this because I dropped off for a while, but this was the vehicle by which I reparented myself, was journaling. And so every day my alarm goes off at like 7:15, and then I sit in my chair, and then another alarm goes off at 7:45, and the alarm is promise to self. And it's much less about what I journal about and much more about the fact that I get to observe my thoughts and be with myself, and that it's my time and it's sacred to me. And I tell my daughter, baby, mommy's going to be journaling. She goes, okay, mommy. And she like lets me journal. So to me, that is everything. It may seem like something small, but to actually, as a mom, carve out half an hour for myself every day where I put my phone down and it's me and my journal, and I go back and I'm like, what's coming up for me? And I go and I underline it. I'm like, okay, how am I feeling? What am I looking forward to today? What's going on in my head? Is this true? That is sacred to me. So that to me is what I do to keep myself in alignment. That and getting outside every day to walk, because that just like my body needs to be regulated sometimes, especially when I get so midday walks and morning journaling have been my anchor.
Those are so powerful. And I feel like you're setting more than for yourself, but an example for your daughter to see that taking care of you is good. Self-love,
Yes.
self-care is you honoring you, doing you a little.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up with that. I did not.
No.
So
Me
it's
either.
like this new generation, this new example for, well, me for my nieces, because I don't have a daughter, but my niece,
But you still are an example.
when I babysit, she sits in the bed. I was like, okay, auntie's gonna go in the bathroom, and she's like, you're gonna meditate. I was like, yes. She knows.
Yeah,
She knows
I
what
love
I'm
that.
gonna do. But my brother has asked me not to show anything that I do in front of her, which because they know what I do, like the period rituals and all of that. And I was like, no, it's okay. I have to respect their boundaries too.
Yes.
And I said, okay, but she knows I meditate. She knows I journal. She knows things like that, which is good. But I'm just very cautious when it comes to her, that she doesn't see what I do, but she knows about it. And she knows it's like self-love, self-care. You got to take you got to meet your own needs. You have to find your own joy. And I tell her all the time, when you grow up, if you ever need any help, I'm here for you.
That's good.
Yes, but they learn through example, right?
Absolutely. And you can make such a profound example. And sometimes an aunt is even more of a safe space than a mother, in the sense where you're like, well, I don't want my mom to get mad at me, but your tia can kind of be like, she's like, like a friend, but like an adult and someone I trust. So it's a beautiful relationship. I love that.
And I'm her godmother too. And more, it goes deeper, but my spiritual beliefs are different now. And they know about them. They know I'm not religious. I'm not subscribed to Catholic religion anymore. I respect because my parents are. But they know I'm still like I'm a spiritual role model in a way. Just a different type of spirituality. But she's into crystals. She's into the full moon. She's into all of that. She's into like picking up feathers and knowing that angels are around you.
Oh,
little things like that. But it's just, she's my wife. My niece is my wife.
I love that. And that is the most important why, because I'm like, you can change the world by like changing what your children or the children in your life are exposed to. We literally, we start with us, but like they are the physical representation of like what the world is going to be and who is going to lead it. So it's beautiful. And I think about that all the time with my daughter, because I'm like, she is a mirror to me and my own healing, but she's also my muse, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I get to show up differently for you. I get to witness a child who is totally confident and outspoken and never anticipates that someone doesn't want to talk to her. Like, she just assumes everybody loves her. And I'm like, my job is literally to just nurture that. That is it. You are perfect. Like, that is, that's beautiful. So
it's just listening those, like, you're worthy, you're enough as you are. You don't have to do anything. You're worthy as you are.
Yes.
Like, that is so important, because I think back every day, I was like, what did I wish my mom would have told me? And I just like, I do the soothing, and I just tell myself that, or I just rock myself, and it's just how
that's what you needed to hear.
Every day I'm like, until it becomes my truth, I'm gonna keep repeating that. And it's like it might never go away, it might never go away, and it's okay. It's just learning as you go.
You learn to give yourself what you needed. That's really all that reparenting is. That's what the healing work is. And, at the end of the day, like, what we needed was very, very, very basic. And that's why I say when you do reparenting, it's generally down to unconditional love, you know, and that we didn't receive it. And how can we give that to ourselves? So, yeah.
Oh my God, this has been amazing. So,
Yes.
how do you want our listeners to contact you and the work that you do? How can people get a hold of your wisdom, of your and
So,
just tap into
yes.
you?
Yeah, the best place is definitely on Instagram. It's where I spend more of my time. It's where, you know, I'm on stories and I just share. I definitely share a lot about my personal life on there because it is related to my work. And so that is at mariela.dallamora on Instagram. Mm-hmm. And okay, so follow me, send me a message. Yes.
Is there anything you want to tell the listeners before we wrap up? Any words of wisdom, anything that you feel?
I think the one message from me, from my life experience, is like, it's never too late to start again. And that it doesn't matter what you've been through. It doesn't matter, you know, if you feel like you're stuck, it's never too late. I didn't begin my awakening journey until I was 31. And I feel like it's when I began living for the first time. And so it's never too late. You can always choose what your future is going to look like and who you want to be starting now. So just to welcome that.
That's amazing. I actually began my awakening at 31 after my Saturn return, which is in Scorpio, it was not fun.
Oh, interesting.
When awaken after our Saturn return, when we get hit in the head with the worst sometimes.
That makes sense, because mine was literally right after my 31st birthday. I responded to a situation as my higher self, whereas before I had responded to the same situation as my wounded self. And it was like I woke up and was like, nope. And I ended a marriage. So it was a 13-year relationship. So it was 31. It is never too late. 30s were beautiful. I'm now 40. I just turned 40. And I feel like I honestly aged backwards from when I was 30 because I'm happier now. I'm fulfilled now. So it's never too late. And I want people to know that. And I think most of the women that I work with are still in like their 20s or like early 30s. And I want to be like, oh my gosh, you have so much time.
And I think it's so good that you're saying that you're happier now, because those are emotions that I don't know, at least me as a first daughter of an immigrant, I used to joy, pleasure, happiness.
Yeah.
I was not used to struggle, hustle, achieve, do, burn out. Mm-hmm. And it's just now tapping into abundance, tapping into this new paradigm of it's okay to be joyful, it's okay to be happy, it's okay to enjoy life, it's okay to make a lot of money, it's okay
and to enjoy life right now. And that's revolutionary when you come from a lineage that was about survival and someday, that because they focused on someday, we can focus on now. We can focus on enjoying ourselves now, and what does joy look like, and what does rest look like, and all of that. Like it's beautiful, and it's literally, from where we come from, it's like revolutionary. Like that's what we get to do. So like, let's never forget that.
Oh my God, I feel like we can do
I know. I love it.
Again, we can do another episode on resting, boundaries, and like so much.
Oh my gosh, yes. On boundaries.
Have to come back, because I can talk to you about this stuff forever.
I love it. And I'm so honored that I was your first guest on your podcast. And just, I loved everything about this. And you're doing such incredible, amazing, needed work for all of us, you know, for all of the daughters of immigrants.
Yes, thank you so much for being my first guest, my first interview. I'm so excited.
Yes, it was so good.
I can't wait to share this conversation with everyone. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you so much for being part of this conversation for Feminine Truth Podcast. This podcast is for you, for me, for us, for the Feminine Collective. Thank you so much for spending your time and energy with us. Share on Instagram and Facebook stories what resonated with you. And if you're listening to this, and for anyone to get a hold of this podcast at Feminine Truth Podcast, and if you feel called to, leave us a review. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know how this has felt for you listening to the podcast. And the episodes are going to be every Tuesday, so I cannot wait to see you next time. Sending so much love.